Hello, I'm EnterElysium, and this is Kerbal Origins. Now, we've got a load of science so far. I've been to Minmus, that was brilliant for science, we've got like 600 from that. But we haven't been to the moon. We've been into orbit, we've been around Kerbal, we haven't been to the moon. So, we're going to go to the moon and just finish off everything in Kerbal Sphere Influence before we, have to start looking further afield. Now, I've got a load of parts, so we're going to be able to pretty much brute force this with as many things as possible. The central section, we're going with 2 science units, 2 goo units, a load of batteries, and I pretty much almost blocked the doorway without realizing it, just looking back in post at this. It's like, whoopsie. And now we've got like thermometers and barometers. I'm just like chucking all that stuff on there. But yeah, that basically the central pit there will come back. The 2 pods at the side will asparagus stage, filling in the fuel in the center, and those are designed to allow us to land on the moon and then take off, and then we'll discard them on the way back to Kerbal. The central system, because we don't have the 2.5 meter stacks, we're using the normal stacks and just having to put the free tricoupler, and then we're going to asparagus stage around them because we just unlocked fuel pipes. It's amazing how much you miss fuel pipes. They're probably the thing that you miss most until you get them if you're a veteran Kerbal player. So now we can asparagus stage the outside. Yay! And I'm using MechJeb here just to look at the thrust to weight, and you look there, it's got like 2 thrust to weight. We don't have a 2 thrust to weight ratio at launch. So I think we go and replace. We're gonna have to replace one of these, yeah, and put a bigger one on, and that lowers it a bit, but not as much as I'd like. So instead, we replace the 30 engines with the T45s. They've got less thrust, but they're just as efficient, and in fact, they've got vector thrust, so they'll keep us on track more, and that means actually that our launch will be generally more efficient because we won't be wasting energy going anywhere. I put the launch clamps on, then sort of put the struts on to keep everything intact because it's probably going to fall off if we don't put like a shitload of struts everywhere. But then I kind of go, actually, we need more thrust to get into orbit. Like we haven't got enough delta V. Our main stack's like 2.8, and then we've got like an 8 and a 700 from the other 2. So we put a load of fuel, solid fuel boosters on because we just really need them to brute force our way to orbit. They're a pretty efficient way of doing a first stage. They're not particularly special or elegant though, but and because they're attached to our asparagus staging, we kind of need to really push the struts, just struts everywhere, just shitloads of struts. But yeah, there we go. Now we're ready to launch, and it's just gonna be a standard launch. There's nothing special about this. We're gonna go up to orbit, we're gonna set an orbit, and then we're just gonna push ourselves out to the moon and then hopefully land there. I don't know exactly what we're going to do for that. I don't know if we're going to go straight to landing or if we're going to go to orbit, transfer, and then land. So, while it's happening, I decided we should talk about space accidents. Preferably the amusing ones. I think we're probably going to skip any of the incredibly tragic or just unfortunate ones. Like Apollo 13, that was really just unfortunate. Almost tragic. And it was somewhat interesting about how, they managed to survive. But I thought we'll go with the more amusing ones, because I'm feeling in a mood to talk about amusing facts. So that means we will definitely be skipping over all the space shuttle disasters, because they're just tragic. There is nothing amusing or particularly fascinating. Or at least there is. They are fascinating to a certain extent on what should not be done, but they aren't, they aren't light-hearted, and I was trying to think of something light-hearted for today. So the Russian space program, that's definitely light-hearted. So yes, they've got a few more accidents that are just amusing rather than tragic. So let's start with the first ever EVA. That was by Alexei Leonov in Voskhod 2, I believe. Yes, but when he went on his EVA, he did his little EVA, and then went to try to get back in the capsule, and then realised his suit had inflated to the point where it couldn't actually fit in the door, and he couldn't move his limbs because, of course, the pressure difference between his suit and the vacuum of space meant that the air had just swollen up his suit, and he couldn't get back in because, he couldn't bend. So that was, not great. So he was there in space like, how do I get back in the capsule? If I can't get back in the capsule, I guess I'd have to die, and they had suicide pills for that purpose. So without telling anyone, just not to alarm anyone, he started venting his own suit in space, outside the capsule, just venting his air into space to try and reduce the pressure. It worked, but Jesus, that's ballsy. Just can you imagine being in space with only like a couple of millimeters of spacesuit protecting you from vacuum and having to vent your air into space to fit back in the capsule? He was fine. He suffered from the bends and so on because, you know, the rapid decompression, but he got back in. Right, okay, we're finishing our burn here. And... whoa, crap. Whoops, I kind of didn't do that, you know, elegantly. I think I was watching the Delta V from the main booster stage, and I was expecting that to die out before we'd done our burn, and then, of course, they died at roughly the same point, and then... See, I had MechJeb on follow node rather than doing it manually. First time I've started using MechJeb for actual control in this. I want to leave it minimal MechJeb, so I want just to do smart SS at the moment. But I think we're going to be having a very weird orbit there. It's a free return orbit, so, you know, it's a really nice orbit if we actually had screwed up enough that we were just going to call it quits, but... Let's start burning in the retrograde just to bring our periaps down, because we do actually want to kind of land on the moon. That is kind of the point here. We want to get samples, we want all that badass science. Let's bring that periaps down. And looking where it is, we'll have pretty low speed when we get there, as we'll be going around the back and then pulling back in, so... I feel we could probably just do a direct landing. We'll decrease the periaps to the point where it's a direct landing, and then we can always push it out a little bit if we actually want to go into an orbit when we're there. There's not much, won't be much fuel, and we aren't incredibly tight on fuel with this. I think we've got quite a bit to spare. Here we go. And I feel good about this. I'm not sure about our landing zone exactly. Of course, you know, the moon's now incredibly bumpy since, you know, what was it? Update 21, was it? I think it was update 21 when the moon became ridiculously bumpy. I'm not a massive fan of that because people tend to pick the moon as their first port of choice for like their first landing after they leave Kerbin, and it's incredibly difficult now with all, well, not incredibly difficult, it's just a lot more difficult. It's not particularly newbie friendly, so... But, you know, it makes it more difficult for us who've been playing for a little while, I guess. So, I think we're just going to go for a direct landing now. Thinking about it, I think we want to change where we're landing, so we're actually landing in maybe that crater. We have got plenty of fuel, so wasting another, I don't know, 300, 350 Delta V trying to land in that crater isn't a massive issue. We at least know the crater's going to be flat. Of course, if you are a beginner watching this, I would recommend Minmus as your first port of call outside of Kerbin, because Minmus has big flat areas. It's very friendly. It's also really low Delta V, so it won't take more Delta V to get there. Taking off is easy as hell. I mean, just jump and you'll probably be in orbit, so... Just pushing the orbit over. You can see the advantage of being on pretty much a direct flight path with very little orbital speed when we get there is the fact that we can pretty much influence our landing point quite easily. I'm trying to basically do a suicide burn, but I'm not exactly how much I need to be suicide burning. I'm used to direct landings being a lot faster than this. So I'm not particularly worried. I'm just wondering how close I can push it without being stupid. Because if I crash now, everyone will hate me. So, put the landing legs down. We've got plenty of fuel really left. There's no real issue with the fuel. Anyway, Alexei Leonov managed to get back in the capsule. Bends. They then had issues getting back into position in time for the re-entry, so they were 46 seconds late in being back into their chairs and center of gravity being correct, and the booster section didn't detach at the right point, so they ended up landing 380 something kilometers from where they were meant to be landing, in the middle of the woods, at night, surrounded by bears and wolves. Of course, this being the Russian space program, and they're meant to be landing on land, they actually had a pistol just in case, but, you know, it's still not a great idea in the dark to be in your space clothes fighting off wolves and bears. So they had to strip down, wring out their sweat-filled clothes, because, of course, it's pretty hairy being in a Soyuz craft. No, it wasn't Soyuz, it was a Vauxhall. Yeah, I can't even pronounce it now. Anyway, they were pretty sweaty, so they had to wring out all their clothes in the minus 30-degree temperatures, and then kind of just wait for rescue. Doesn't sound fun. Oh, just landing. Oh! I was kind of thinking, ooh, crap. Oh! I like the fact we've got a lot of SAS in that capsule and a lot of torque in there. We're safe, it's fine! I kind of looked at the shadow and was like, oh, we're there, and then dropped the thrust, and then we fell a few more meters than I was expecting, so I was kind of a bit worried there, but these landing legs are pretty good. I do like the new landing legs. So let's get all of our science. You can see there's actually shitloads of science to be done now. We'll get a crew report. We could just beam back the crew report. We do have the power for it, but now I've got the other things. I think if I go and start transmitting, it might transmit more than just a crew report. And since we are going back, I don't really mind. We have got a crew report from orbit near the moon anyway, so it's not a real issue if we, don't get a second duplicate or whatever. Of course, in this, I'm trying not to do too many duplicates, and I'm trying not to do repeat transmits, because while you can do that, it's a bit cheaty. Scott Manley showed how you could break the game pretty much by, on your second launch, going around all the planets and just repeat transmitting. So they're actually, in update 23, they're planning to change how transmission works. So basically make it a bit like this, and you can only sort of transmit to a certain extent. So let's get our surface sample. There we go, 120 science. Pretty damn good. And plant flag. Because, of course, we're planting flags everywhere we go. And site name. It's Moon 4, isn't it, this one? Moon 4. Plaque text. No cheese. No cheese. Dairy? I mean dairy. Dairy industry. Dairy industry disappointed. No cheese, dairy industry disappointed. There we go. Not the dairy industry. The dairy industry probably are disappointed as well. There's no cheese there. It would mean fairly cheap cheese, I guess, if we could start importing it from the moon. Oops, a little bit far away. I could have turned the RCS on, but, might as well just walk forwards. Save the RCS. So yes, the crew had to wait out in their capsule until the next morning in the sub 30 temperatures, until they got saved by guys on skis with food and logs, and able to build a fire and cook some food for them. While they were having to wait overnight, they didn't get the luxury of the capsule to protect them, because the door had automatically got blown open from the explosive bolts, so wasn't really that comfortable. Let's take off. I only want to put a mild thrust on, just so I can grab the... Is it space near moon? I thought there'd be lower space and upper space or whatever. Okay, well, we'll take it anyway. I think we may have a duplicate of that, because we did get one when we flew near the moon. It wasn't really near the moon, we were flying, we're really far out, but I guess we'll take it. And let's see if there's a trace atmosphere. No, we can't do an atmosphere scan. There's not even a trace atmosphere. Our moon, of course, actually does have a trace atmosphere. It's just a trace. But apparently trace doesn't count for the barometer here. Probably just too low. And let's start burning up. Not burning up, just burning upwards from the moon. Yeah, so let's talk about another slightly amusing incident. Soyuz 23 was meant to go up and dock and do some docking stuff, but it kind of had a bad... pretty much it was unlucky. On the way to the launch pad, the bus broke down for the cosmonauts. Then, when they finally got there and it took off, they were having some problems with, I think it's wind shear or something? Yeah, something like that. And the launch almost got abandoned. But then they finally got up to orbit, and they couldn't dock with I think it was a Salet or something. They couldn't dock where they wanted to dock. And so they got cancelled, so they had to come back. And they came back, and due to strong gusts, they ended up 120 kilometers, which is about 75 miles. 75, 80, 75 miles from where they were meant to be landing. And it marks the first time and the only time in the Russian space program that they've actually had a splashdown rather than a land landing. This wasn't intentional, however. So they landed on top of a frozen lake. And then, due to saltwater corrosion, the emergency parachute fired, filled with water, and dragged them under. And then they ended up 7 meters underwater in a frozen lake. And it was 9 hours before they were recovered. Because it was foggy, and... Oh, that's such a pretty good landing point. We're pretty much just going to clip the atmosphere there. A little bit of adjustment. So we'll just... There we go. Actually pushing out a little bit, just so that we can go through more atmosphere. We've technically got periaps of like 10 kilometers now. So we'll just go in very nice and slowly. No issues with having to do a retro burn. We'll just come in unpowered. We have got plenty of fuel left. Oh, don't get me wrong. We've got like over a kilometer of Delta V, like 1.4 kilometers. We could probably go to Juna now, but we're not gonna, because we wouldn't get back. And Jeb needs to be back. But yeah. So they ended up 7 meters underwater in a frozen saltwater lake. It wasn't frozen. It was below freezing, but you get the point. Yeah. So, eventually, after 9 hours, their capsule was recovered. It's gotta be pretty terrifying being 7 meters underwater after being in space, and then the capsule slowly getting cold around you to, like, negative degrees, and you running out of air and having just... Ugh. They, of course, did survive, as did Alexei Leonov after his decompression sickness, and then the landing of the wolves and the bears. It's just pretty... Oh, we're going to be landing in the grasslands marker. It's a shame we're not landing anywhere that's not grasslands, because if we landed in the mountains or somewhere, we could get Jeb out and Jeb could take a sample. It wouldn't be worth much science, it'd be worth like 8 or 9 or something. But it'd be you know, every little helps. Oh well, we're just going to be landing on grasslands. We'll probably just call it there, and instead of having to send Jeb out and get a sample of grasslands that we've already got. Here, I'm liking the fact that we've still got Mech Jeb for all the stats. It's nice to actually know that we're only like 200 meters off the ground rather than 750. Of course, we've got lights on this one now, so, you know, that's helpful. And we're landed! With all of our science. Now let's see how much we got, because we got just under 600 for Minmus. I used the barometers in flight, so we actually did get some barometer stuff, but it was in the upper atmosphere of Kerbin. Of course, needs a decent atmosphere. Couldn't even get it in, like, the really upper atmosphere. Ooh, look at that. 602 science in total. That's including, like, the leftovers, but... it's not as much as Minmus, but it's pretty damn good. This'll definitely help. I've been EnterElysium, and this has been Kerbal Origins. And, you know, if you liked it, like, subscribe, etc. Blah, 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 blah. You know the drill. Anyway, I will catch you later, guys, and stay shiny.